my month in Japan is almost over. I'm at the Tokyo Narita airport, and you can definitely tell it's Japan because of all the capsule toys and everything. Otherwise, it's pretty nondescript. So there's just kind of one little final thought that I felt was even worth making its own little video about before my 15-hour flight back to Warsaw. And it's about, like, I'm going to say the Tokyo Metro or Tokyo Public Transportation System. I think there's part of it that's technically considered the Metro, but it's really kind of like this whole train system going around Tokyo. And to be honest, this was probably the worst experience of my time in Japan. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my time in Japan, but it was just so exhausting to deal with. So I just kind of wanted to say, like, why I absolutely hate this transportation system. And, you know, it's on time, you generally, so that's one of the positives. I mean, I think kind of the only positive. So one of the problems, you know, it takes, I mean, Tokyo is a big city, but I still found, you know, with all the very complicated changings and everything, it would take like often 60 to 90 minutes to really go anywhere, which was kind of difficult and exhausting because, you know, you're running around, you're doing all these changes and everything, and it's just, you know, the worst, or one of the most confusing things was actually the changing of payments for lines. So basically there's this complicated thing where there's like some things that are considered these JR lines, and I think that's all in the same system, but then there's multiple other companies running different metro lines, and then you have to get off and then you have to change, and then like how you actually change the line is so complicated sometimes, and like there's technically signs, but there's a good chance you're not gonna make it. And then the worst thing about this is that, okay, I would say this is okay, except you have to actually compute how much you're going to pay to go to the different places. And they'll have a chart and say, like, okay, this is the cost to go between these two lines. Sometimes it's in English, but very, very often it's not. So I have an example I found, and they're not that hard to find. So imagine, you know, you don't really know what you're doing, and you come here, and, you know, I've never seen a metro run like this anywhere else I've been before. You know, I've been in complicated metro systems, say like in London or Singapore or other big cities, and I haven't had to deal with this. So that's something, I mean, there's probably some historical reason why it developed like that, but it really does not work well. And it's not nearly so bad, say, in other reasonable, I mean, not as big cities, but like, you know, say Sendai, Kyoto, Hiroshima, Nagoya that I was at. So generally, like, yeah, the price also. So like, this is something I noticed that, you know, so I was able to get this card. And if you don't get the card, you're kind of screwed, because then even in like simpler metro systems, like say in Nagoya, we had the math conference there, you know, people were paying, had to figure out like, oh, you know, once again, like how much I'm going to pay to go this many lines and get this ticket and wait and all that. And like in Poland, for example, you know, you can just like have a simple app where you just easily pay and there's no problems. And there was an app I tried to download, but then everything was in Japanese. And then once again, it's hard if you're visiting. But even if you are visiting, still the fact that you even have to worry about these constant changes, I mean, it's not in any other system I've been to, at least. Generally, I just found it like exhausting to use. So not that like getting anywhere is really the best part of any sort of, you know, experience in a city, but you know, it's just like the rush to change all this just like together. You're waiting in like a super packed train. You know, obviously they don't send enough trains because there's so many people on them, and it's just such an exhausting experience. So like, I thought there was a lot of really cool stuff in Tokyo, but just dealing with getting places was such a horrible headache. And, you know, once again, okay, yeah, I'm American. In all fairness, like the lack of public transportation is still far worse than anything like this you're going to deal with. But say in Europe, I don't really think that this is a problem. So what else do we have to deal with? And yeah, the last thing, and maybe even the most significant, is the complete terrible, terrible lack of any sort of night transportation. So once again, you know, say in Poland or a bunch of other places, there's something like a night bus system, or there's something at least, so you're not stranded. And in Tokyo, it's very, very clear that there's a huge demand for night transportation. The taxis are super expensive, and I kind of felt like a lot of things just kind of got artificially cut short just because it's like, oh, well, the metro is going to stop running, even though there's no good reason that it should be. So I don't really see any excuse for that. Like, I talked to some people about it, and they said, okay, it's like because of the bad work culture, that's just an excuse for people who are working more hours than they should to go back home. And I mean, yeah, okay, but like that is a problem to solve, but you don't do this by crippling the public transportation system. So I just kind of wanted to say those because I think it's not really emphasized much just how horrible this public transportation system is. Like I said, I like that things like the Shinkansen are on time, but actually just getting around, especially Tokyo, is just such an absolute nightmare. I mean, and I kind of feel like some people might respond and say something like, oh, well, you're not used to it. You'll just, you get accustomed to it. But it's just like, why do you have to? Like when you go other places and it's not like this, it just seems like kind of making excuses for a bad system. So anyways, that's kind of the last thought I wanted to have. I wanted to record it in the actual metro, but I was just rushing to get to the airport in time, and now I have some actual downtime. So I'm heading back to Warsaw, and I got my 15-hour flight, and just trying to get some walking around before I have to sit for that long. So anyways, the usual like, comment, subscribe, share, and all this sort of stuff. It helps the channel. And I don't know where I'm going to go next, so stick around and see.